First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Browder, for this opportunity and for our conversation. First of all, I would like to ask you about these publications in the Western media about the bribery, about money that are flowing and used to flow from Russia to European countries, and not only European, foreign countries. Do you think that right now, in the middle of this terrible war, there are people in the Western world, Western politicians, who are getting money from Kremlin?
There's no question. The influence operations that the Putin regime have orchestrated over the last 22 years have not stopped. And there are many people that have taken a lot of money that continue to try to undermine any type of tough action. Just to give you an example, you have Viktor Orban, who's clearly on the payroll, who is now trying to sabotage EU sanctions. You have Berlusconi, who's, I don't know if he's taken bribes or he's just an old, foolish man who's supporting Putin. You have Gerhard Schroeder, who is doing that. And then, of course, these are the sort of Premier League enablers, Western enablers, but you have many people at sort of the next levels down who either are sort of quietly working on projects for the Kremlin or are waiting for their moment. And I'm 100% sure that this operation continues.
But you are naming, if we don't count Mr. Orban, who is obviously an exception, I would say, in the European Union. But do you think that there are still people who are in power, actually, and who are planning to get some power and become influential in European countries, who are connected with Vladimir Putin and others? I mean, there are some concerns about new Italian government, for example, and maybe others. Do you have any facts that you would like to share with us?
Well, so we haven't seen the actions of the new Italian government, and oftentimes when you have a situation like this where Putin's actions are so extreme that it's almost impossible for anyone to say anything, that the people on the payroll just keep quiet for a while and they look for an opportunity. And so, what Putin has done by raising the price of fuel and energy in the West is created a fertile environment for populists and Putin sympathizers in the West to come into power. And so I think they're not going to come into power. I mean, they're not going to say anything, in the same weekend that Putin is threatening nuclear war. But at some point in, some quiet moment, you'll start to see the effects of the Putin international influence campaign coming into our daily lives.
If there is no nuclear war, let's hope for it, then do you think that people like that may be discovered in the European Parliament, for example? Is that a possible?
There's definitely people in the European Parliament from these far-right parties, and there are people in the U.S. Congress. If you look at the people who voted against Finland and Sweden joining NATO, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Madison Cawthorn, these are all hardcore, far-right, pro-Trump, MAGA, pro-Putin members of Congress. You have Tucker Carlson, who's openly supporting Russia against Ukraine. So there's all sorts of these characters around. Thankfully, they don't have a lot of influence, but at some point they may, or their influence may grow.
Remember, of course, we all remember Mr. Trump when he was a president. There was this no collusion saying. He was repeating all around, right, that there is no collusion with Russia, and there was a Russiagate, and there's no proof so far that he was connected to Russia or any other politicians in the United States. Do you think there is a possibility and prospect of discovering some new facts about these connections?
Well, first of all, let's look at the Mueller report. 99% of the population never read the Mueller report. I did. What the Mueller report says is that there were all sorts of people on the Trump campaign that were desperately trying to find people in the Russian government to collude with. And there are people in the Russian government that were desperately trying to find people in the Trump campaign to collude with. And what the report said is that they couldn't prove any collusion. It doesn't mean that there wasn't collusion going on. And it's certain, based on Trump's behavior, that he felt some sympathy, whether it was just because he likes rich guys or something more sinister, with Putin. And it was proven in his impeachment trials that he was withholding weapons from Ukraine, not because he was trying to help Russia, but because he wanted Ukraine to give him dirt on his political opponent.
Mhm.
So, I mean, he's a horrifying man, and if he were to be elected in 2024, all of Putin's dreams may come true.
Maybe you could give us some sort of understanding how the schemes work. For example, do you think that, where does Vladimir Putin has this millions of dollars and euros, dollars mainly, for the war that he is getting more and more aggressive in Ukraine right now? Where does this money come from? Is it, is it so simple, like money from gas and oil? Maybe something else?
Well, so there's all sorts of different parts of the Russian budget and Russian malign operations. So the main war machine is basically riding off the back of revenues from oil and gas. The sanctions have been quite effective. The freezing of $350 billion of central bank reserves, cutting off Russia from SWIFT, the freezing of oligarchs' money, that's been very effective. But at the same time, you have this enormous amount of money flowing in every day from the sale of oil and gas. And because Putin has pushed up the price of oil and gas, he actually gets more revenue than he got before. And that more revenue is being used to fund this very expensive war. Now, the sanctions have worked. Look, Russia has run out of certain weapons. A lot of stuff has been destroyed in Ukraine, and the sanctions mean that most countries won't sell Russia weapons. So where are they buying the weapons from? They're buying Iranian drones. They're buying artillery from North Korea, two countries that aren't worried about U.S. sanctions. So I would argue that Putin may have a lot of money, but his money is not good in most places because of these sanctions.
Okay, but do you think that there should be further sanctions against Russian Federation? Is there anything that may be done and should be done, in your opinion, to stop this financial flaw, to stop the war, to try to stop the war?
Well, interestingly, Putin has done more to sanction himself than we could have ever done to sanction him by cutting off the flow of gas to Europe. That's Gazprom is responsible for 25% of the budget revenues of the Russian Federation. And if the gas doesn't flow, then that money gets cut off. But more importantly, to the extent that the West wants to enforce the sanctions, there's two distinct groups. There is the G7, United States, Germany, Canada, Japan, etc., who are sanctioning Russia, and then you have, which is the major, most important economic trading bloc in the world. And then you have these what I call non-aligned countries: China, India, South Africa, Indonesia, Brazil. And I think that at some point, as the situation gets worse and worse, as the situation gets worse and worse, you're going to end up with a thing where the G7 countries will tell the Indias and Brazils, pick sides. Either you trade with us or you trade with Russia. What do you want? Because if we do that, then we cut off one of the major loopholes that Russia is continuing to exploit.
What do you think is the right answer of the European Union and the United States of America on this enormous flow of men trying to escape Russia right now?
Well, this is a very interesting issue. My position is that the people who are trying to flee conscription have no place in the European Union. I think that the people who have opposed Putin early in the war and fled are welcome. I think the Ukrainians who are the victims of Putin's murderous war are welcome. But those people who all of a sudden just decided that now is the moment to flee, they've been offered asylum by Ukraine. Zelensky said, if you want to surrender, we will take you. We'll treat you in a civilized manner. We won't tell the Russian government that you surrendered and you don't have to go back. That's their option. Either stay in Russia and protest um, and defy the regime, or if they want to save their lives, then accept Zelensky's offer. I don't think that the European Union has any responsibility for these individuals. They've created, Putin has created a refugee crisis with the Ukrainians, and everybody has sort of sat in Russia and said nothing up until the time when they're worried about their own self-interest. And it's time that they stand up to Putin themselves. And if they want to stop this, then that's what they should be doing.
Well, isn't it better to escape Russia than going to Ukraine, where the possibility that you can stay alive is not very high, and there is a big question. Maybe it's better not to go there, not to kill Ukrainians, or not to be under the risk, because there's no guarantee, right?
Well, Zelensky has offered them a very civilized way to surrender where their lives will be spared. And so that seems to me to be the best option.
All right. So the final thing is that I would like to ask you about your new book, Mr. Browder, because it's really connected to this new reality. This book is named Freezing Order, a true story of money laundering, murder, and surviving Vladimir Putin's wrath. Can you tell us in a couple of words what this is about, and why have you decided to write about this issue?
Well, this book was all about the murder of Sergei Magnitsky, the money that he uncovered, and where that money went, and going after that money and freezing it. And we discovered that some of that money went to Vladimir Putin, and we discovered that this particular crime, this a $230 million crime, was one of 1,000 similar crimes that Putin is the beneficiary of. That it's actually $230 billion we could identify of illicit funds stolen from the Russian people. And if I were to, and that's just what we were able to identify in one bank, the Danske Bank in Estonia. If we were able to lift the hood on other banks, like Raiffeisen Bank and Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse, and UBS, I think the amount of money that Putin and his cronies have stolen in the last 22 years is $1 trillion, $1,000 billion. And I think that this is the cause of all problems. I think that Putin understood that if he didn't start a war to distract people, they would eventually come for him. And that's why he's at war, is to stay in power. This is a wag the dog war. This is a war to stay in power. Comes straight out of the Machiavelli playbook. And I think that it's important to understand why Putin is doing this. My book we couldn't be published in Russia because it was on a banned list, and so we published it in Russian ourselves. We've translated it, and we're offering it for free to all Russian speakers on www.billbrowder.com. You can download it for free if you can get beyond the firewalls of Russia. And this book really opens your eyes to how evil and corrupt Putin is. And everything that he says is a lie. And if you read this book and you read what happened to me and Sergei Magnitsky and all other people who are standing up to Putin, you'll understand what he's all about. And even people who are very cynical and pessimistic are shocked by the facts and revelations in this book.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation and for your book, Mr. Browder. Good to see you on TV Rain.
Thank you.